All right, so we have FSA testing going on tomorrow, and I just wanted to be sure that you had an example to watch very quickly before you do a QuizizZ that we have scheduled for you. So we have the 45-45-90s and the 30-60-90s. And the 45-45-90, if you know the leg, you just multiply by the square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse. If you know the hypotenuse, you're going to divide by the square root of 2 to come back down to the leg. In the 30-60-90, the side opposite the 30-degree angle is the shortest leg, and it is the side to know, okay? If you know it, you can find everything else. So if you know the short leg, you multiply by the square root of 3 to find the long leg. And if you know the short leg, you're going to double it in order to find, the hypotenuse. And then you're just going to go the other way around. You need the short leg. It's the key to everything. So if you start with the long leg, you're going to divide by the square root of 3 to come back down to the short leg and so on. So let me just look at a couple of problems. On the QuizizZ, we're going to keep it really straightforward in that we don't want to make it about simplifying the radicals necessarily. We just want to test whether or not you're able to solve these problems. So this would be a 45-45-90. We've got the right angle and we can see that it's isosceles. So since two sides are congruent, we know those base angles have to be congruent. If you subtract 90 from 180 and divide that in half, each of these become 45 and 45. Okay, so that's our 45-45-90. The legs are equal to each other. So suppose you knew that that leg was 3, and I wanted you to find x, the other leg, and y, the hypotenuse. Well, if you know the leg, you just multiply it by the square root of 2 to come up with the hypotenuse, and the legs are equal. So x would also equal 3, and our hypotenuse would just be the leg times the square root of 2. Done. And then the other thing that you might see on the QuizizZ is we might do it the other way around, and maybe we give you the hypotenuse and we tell you that this is 72 times the square root of 2, and we want to know what x and y are. So this is what I mean by we'll probably keep the radicals really simple on the QuizizZ. Well, now you're going the other way. You're starting with the hypotenuse, and so you would have to divide it by the square root of 2 to come back down to the leg, go again the opposite direction. So if you take the hypotenuse, 72 times the square root of 2, and you divide that by the square root of 2, those are going to cancel out, and all you have left is 72. So each of the legs would be 72 and 72. So that's the 45-45-90. And then we have our 30-60-90 triangle, where remember the shortest leg is across from the smallest angle. This is the all-important short leg. You need it because it's the key to both the long leg and the hypotenuse. Short leg is the most important. If you know the short leg, you double it to find the hypotenuse. And if you know the short leg, you multiply it by the square root of 3 to find the long leg. Those are the two things that we need to do. So let's say that we knew that this was 17 and we wanted to find x and y. Well, x is across from the 60-degree angle, so that's the long leg. So to find the long leg, I take the short leg and multiply by root 3. The short leg is 17. I multiply by the square root of 3, and that's all I can do. So that's my long leg. So x is 17 times the square root of 3. And then to get the hypotenuse, which in this case is y, you take the short leg and you just double it. So my short leg is 17, and I'm going to double that, and we get 34. So the hypotenuse would be 34. Okay, so if you know the short leg, you can find everything else. But suppose we don't know the short leg, suppose we know the hypotenuse, and let's say that the hypotenuse is 24. Well, if you know the hypotenuse, to go the other way, instead of multiplying by 2, you would divide by 2 to come back down to the short leg. So if we take 24 and divide that by 2, that's 12, and our short leg would be 12. And then we go forward. Once you know this, Now if you know the short leg, you'll multiply by the square root of 3 to find the long leg. So you'll take 12 and you'll multiply by the square root of 3, but there's nothing I can do there. So that would simply be my long leg. The short leg times the square root of 3 is the long leg. The short leg doubled is the hypotenuse. All right, and then let's look at one other scenario. Suppose you knew the long leg. Let's just say that this was 11 times the square root of 3, and you had to find x and y. Well, if you know the long leg going backwards, you would have to divide by the square root of 3. So the long leg divided by the square root of 3 is going to give you the short leg. So if you take the long leg, which is 11 root 3, and you divide it by the square root of 3, those would just cancel out, and you just end up with 11. And then once you know the short leg, you take the short leg and you double it in order to come up with the hypotenuse. So 11 doubled would give us 22 for the hypotenuse. And in terms of the types of problems you'll see on the quizzes, that's it. I don't believe there are any with really difficult radicals. This QuizizZ is a grade for correctness, so I encourage you to get a whiteboard and carefully work, or whiteboard, I'm not sure which direction, and carefully work those out and take your time on the quizzes and submit your answers. Do the best.